Okay. All righty. I'm going to put our class up, and I'm going to, I skipped one of the Mishnahs. For those of you, I don't know if Paula is behind the Paula or if it's Jeffrey, but Paula would probably know that I skipped Mishnah 3. But Julie, is there any way to make it a bit bigger? Not huge, but just a bit bigger for my middle-aged. There we go. Okay. All right. We are quoting Rabban Gamliel, who was the grandson. Paula. I thought maybe you're Jeffrey. So, because Paula remembers, Paula keeps all the papers. She was the secretary we never hired, the assistant, the office assistant we never hired. Okay. We're on the 4th Mishnah of chapter 2. Rabban Gamliel, the grandson of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who was the rabbi of Rabbinic Judaism, the rabbi that codified the oral law, put it into writing, and put it down into writing, and really saved Rabbinic Judaism. So these are the great heavyweights of Jewish history. And we always know that the things that are said in Pirkei Avot are not just sayings. They're not, today we have so many sayings, some of them very powerful in the form of memes and whatever, but this is really, these are words for posterity. These are words to live by, that we can trust, that we can take in, each of us on our own level, and really internalize them as true wisdom for living. And this one is a very, very powerful one. And I hope my goal today with this particular Mishnah is that you'll really apply it to your life, like all of the Mishnahs, but this one in particular is quite powerful. Hu haya omer, who is he? Rabban Gamliel. Aseh ritzono k'ritzoncha. Do God's will, do his will, as if it were yours. Kedei sheya'aseh ritzoncha k'ritzono, so that he may do your will as if it were his. Bata ritzoncha b'pnei ritzono, set aside your will for the sake of his, kedei sheyavata ratzon acherim mipnei ritzonecha, that he may set aside the will of others for the sake of yours. Okay, let's dissect this a little bit. It looks almost redundant. What does it mean? Let's start with the first sentence. Do his will as if it were your will, so that he may do your will as if it were his. Avos here is asking us to do something like almost like, what? Like ludicrous, like how could we possibly do this? Okay, this is like, how, what? Do God's will like it was yours. In other words, we know the will of God. The will of God, although we can't know God, although God is unknowable, God is absolute, God is unfragmentable, and therefore not knowable by the human being, by a man of flesh and blood. But we know God's will as revealed in the Torah. So even though we can't know God, we unbelievably know God's will as reflected in the Torah. And these are the mitzvot of the Torah, which we're going to learn in essence what they are. But here it's saying, do the mitzvot, which are God's will, like your will. That's huge, because most of the time our will takes us in the other direction. We want independence. We want to have what we have when we want to have it, eat what we want to eat when we want to eat it, do what we want to do when we want to do it, and with whom. We have almost like an independent will, and it's almost inconceivable that what Rabban Gamliel here is saying is, he's not saying, well, let's look at what he's not saying. He's not saying follow the will, God's will in the Torah, follow his will as if it's some sort of separate code of ethics separate from you. It's not saying do God's will, keep the laws. It's taking a step beyond that, and it's saying make what God wants from the human being, or let's make it even more personal. Make what God wants for you to be what you desire. That's really what it's saying, that the more a person thinks about God, contemplates the idea that an absolute creator is not only sustaining the world at every moment, but loves you with a love that's absolute and unconditional, and gave you, so to speak, a manual for living, a manual for optimal living. Reflect on that, meditate on that so much that you actually want to do it like your own will. It's really like a remarkable thing that he's saying here, because the bottom line is we human beings have wills that take us in all different directions. And we're always kind of, observant Jews struggle all the time. Well, I want this, but God's will is this. So here it's really asking us to deeply reflect on just how absolutely loving God is, that he gave us a manual for life. It's like, think of anything that comes with a manual, which we usually don't read. But if we read it, we would know how to optimally use that vacuum, or use that computer, or use that piece of technology, or use that X. We would know how to use it optimally if we read the manual. And God, in his love for us, gave us a Torah that tells us the way in this world. The more the human being takes the time to contemplate that, wow, Hashem, you really love me. It's almost like a parent. Like I've said this so many times, but I don't know, it always made such a big impression on me. An old, very, very dear friend of mine grew up with a very, very distant parent, painfully distant, neglecting parent. And she would always say, I would have rather my mother yell at me. I would have rather my mother was exasperated with me, but to have my mother almost like entirely aloof from me, that was a pain that had no description. And the idea that God cares so much, so to speak, that he tells us how to live in the most specific terms in the form of the Torah is a reflection of, I love you and I want you to maximize your life. The more the human being contemplates that, the more you can imagine almost desiring what God desires from us. But we also have to be real with the fact that we have a super, super strong will. And when we want something, there is nothing that can stop us. I mean, when you want that Twinkie, when you want that Ben & Jerry's, when you want that glass of wine, when you want that just zoning out, whatever you want, you'll get it. You'll make sure to make it happen. I mean, I wrote this. But this is this class. Actually, some classes I start from the beginning, and some classes I had stored away. And this one I had stored away, and I wrote my coffee story on this. So some of you might remember this story, but it just shows you how far you'll go to get your will met. So I remember when we lived in Milwaukee, we spent Shabbat in Glendale, Wisconsin. So Glendale is a suburb. Yeah, right there, Julia. That's fine. Glendale is a suburb of the west side of Milwaukee where we lived. And so we slept there were two people. So there were two families that lived in Glendale. They were about a mile away from each other. So we got to their house and we stayed over there because of course we don't drive on Shabbat. And, we put all our clothes down and we went, we had a beautiful Shabbat dinner at one of the families, and it was just beautiful, and went to sleep. And when we woke up, there was a massive snowstorm, and you'll only see in your neck of the woods now, right? Massive, massive snowstorm. And I woke up to a horrifying sight. There was no coffee urn. Now, that sounds funny and really silly and ridiculous, but for me not to have my morning coffee is like, I can't enjoy the day. I totally addicted to coffee, cannot enjoy the day without a hot cup of coffee in the morning. And they didn't have an urn, and we don't boil water on Shabbat. So here I was, and I couldn't go to a neighbor and have them boil water because we don't boil water on Shabbat. So I just like, what am I going to do? I cannot get through this day without a cup of coffee. And so I put on all my winter clothes, and I put on the snow pants, and I put on the woman who lived, oh yeah, Linda, I totally understand. Like only a fellow coffee addict could understand this. But if anyone has any addiction of any kind, they'll understand this, right? So thank God this is a fairly innocuous addiction. But anyway, it's still an addiction. So I put on my host's like snow boots, and I trudged a mile to the other family's house to get a cup of coffee. Thank God they had an urn. But the point of this cute little story is when you want something, you'll work so hard to get it. You will, that's how strong will is. That there's something in the Talmud that says that nothing stands before the will of a person. And it's interesting to think in your own life, what do I want so much that like I would do anything to get it? And and the idea here is understanding will, that on some level, the deepest way to live, the most incredible way to live is to want what God wants for you with the want that you have for your coffee. And that's really asking a lot. I mean, there are people in this world that are on such a high level. Of course, you might have heard from Even Gotti that a very, very, the greatest rabbi of our generation died this week. Rav Kanievsky. He was, well, losing him is very, very serious because he was truly the leader of the generation and kind of was like the pillar that kept the Torah world alive and strong, and losing him is a disaster. But someone like him, okay, his will and God's will are symbiotic. They're literally one, but we are another story altogether. And so this is really very powerful, that do his will as if it were your will. Well, first we got to understand will. We got to understand wanting something. Sometimes we learn wanting something from evil people. I mean, God forbid, lo aleinu lahavdil elef havdalas. That means I'm making a total separation. But look at what's happening. Look at Vladimir Putin. Look what he will do to get his will met. Look how much havoc he'll wreak. Look how much he'll destroy to get his desire met. Look at the lies and the devastation and the violence. Look at, God forbid, lo aleinu elef havdalas, but look at Adolf Hitler. Look what he did to create, to bring his plans into fruition. Well, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov, the Besht, the founder of the Hasidic movement, says, what can we learn? Of course, he lived before Hitler and he lived before Putin. He lived hundreds of years ago. He was the founder of the Hasidic movement, but there were plenty of terrible people in his day too. And he said, what can you learn from evil, like unadulterated evil? Would that I could apply his zeal and his wholeheartedness for evil to my good deeds. What can I learn from evil? That the person who wants to wreak utter havoc is so myopically single focused on wreaking havoc. Would that I could desire you, God, desire good, desire kindness, desire clean speech, desire doing good in this world with the same passion as the evil man wreaks when he's creating like intense evil in the world. So what we learn from a truly evil person is the myopia of desire, that if you look in our current events, that one man could destroy the world, and that one man could justify wreaking such havoc because he's so singularly focused on his will. And I think the operative word here is singularly focused. We're not singular. God is one, but we're kind of two. We're Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We have a side of us that wants what's truly right, And we have a side of us that just wants to do what we want to do. So I think what's so important here is that the concept of being created, B'Tselem Elohim, the concept of being created in the image of God means that just as God is something, we too can be like that something. Just as God is compassionate, we too can be compassionate. Just as God is giving, we too can be givers. So just like God is a creator, we talked about that in the last class, we too can be creative. We can create worlds. And when we don't create, when we don't use our strengths to make a difference in the world, we feel a certain depression. We feel a certain discordance within us. Why? Because we're created in the image of God. So when we don't when we don't manifest God's attributes, we actually suffer terribly, and in the form of anxiety and in the form of depression, because in the form of self-confidence, because there's a part of us that's literally like a piece of God himself. And so just as God is X, we too can be X, and we need to be X. So along with creativity, along with compassion, along with giving, God is one. Shema Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem, Echad. God is one. He's ultimate unity. He's absolutely unified, which means nothing contradicts within him. Nothing creates tension or contradictory components within him. So we have two very, very strong pulls within us. However, that being said, the more we unify the two sides of us, the more we harmonize the discordant elements within us and create that sort of harmony, the more menuchat hanefesh we feel, the more peace of mind we feel, the more self-esteem we feel, the more powerful we feel. But anybody who struggled with addiction or loves somebody who struggled with addiction, and you don't have to struggle with addiction to understand this, but addiction is perhaps the most extreme example. When it doesn't matter, whatever you want, something is pulling you, which seems almost entirely out of your control. But the psychological angst that comes with discordant elements with us, what I think that Rabbi Gamliel is saying is, the more you harmonize what you really truly want to be with what you desire, or what you choose, how you choose to behave, the less inner contradiction, the more peace. Now, when you hear that, you might say, "Ay, but like, I'll never want what God wants for me, because there's so much that, like, let's face it, there's so much in the Torah that's so limiting. Like, there's so much of my time isn't truly my own. Even my body isn't truly my own. I can't eat exactly what I want. I don't necessarily experience God's will as even approximating what I want for myself." And here I think is where it's important, really, really important to think about this. I can't force a paradigm shift on you. I can't force you to see it in a new way, but to truly understand that what God really wants for us, because we kind of don't believe that our will, like, why would we want what God wants from us? Like kosher, Shabbat, mikvah, all the mitzvot that curtail us. Maybe on some lofty spiritual level, but I don't really like. I want the restaurant that I want. I can't justify this. I can't make it work. So the paradigm shift that to contemplate is something that Rav Noach Weinberg and so many others, but Rav Noach Weinberg talked about it all the time, and other great thinkers talk about it all the time, which is that God created us for pleasure. He did not create us as desire machines, and then like a scolding teacher then give us this set of laws to make us like mildly miserable and guilty when we don't do it and curtailed when we do it, or you can't win, right? Either I don't do it and I feel guilty that I'm not doing it, or I do it and I feel curtailed that I'm doing. So, but the truth is that God creates us for pleasure. And if you really think about it, there's a wonderful book that I learned with the group years ago by Rabbi Ben Sion Schaefer, called Survive, Don't Just Survive, Thrive. I guess something like that. It's a very, very special book, but the idea, it's in the Mesilas Yesharim. All the great writers talk about this, that God creates us for pleasure. When you think about it, when you really, really think about it, God could have created us in a totally different world. We could have woken up in the morning and everything could have been in black and white, white, and gray. That's all we experienced. Food could have been in the form of a pill, right? You could have gotten all your nutrients met in the form of a pill, right? Colors, tastes, textures. Yes, there is tremendous evil in the world, and the world is a very complicated and painful place. But when we see what's also going on is that the world is created for pleasure. Everything that was created didn't need to be. When it says that God created the world from nothing, it literally meant from nothing, meaning the fact that flowers exist, the fact that tastes and textures and crunch and sweetness and colors and memory and our eyes and vision, everything that we have is designed for us to experience the world for pleasure. This is so important because when we're trying to harmonize our will that wants independence so much, that doesn't want to be told what to do at all, when we're trying to harmonize our will with our Creator's will, we really need to trust and know and believe and live with the concept, with the basic foundational understanding that God wants us to have pleasure in the world. He really, truly wants us to have pleasure. So how do we understand that what he wants for us, it might be not easy. It might ask a lot of us, and it's not all or nothing. Let's say a person doesn't keep kosher, but they might say, you know what? I think that I'm going to refrain from eating shellfish or whatever it is. How can I see that as truly, like, how can the pleasure that I get from doing God's will be a deeper pleasure than the taste of the lobster? Like, how does that work? And the truth is, once you understand that God creates us for pleasure, but not all pleasures are alike. So the pleasure of lobster and the pleasure of harmonizing your behavior with God's will, they're not the same thing. Rav Noach gives a beautiful example of, like, not beautiful, but kind of an illustrative example, that if somebody said to you, I'll give you $10 million for your eyes, for your eyes, so to speak, or I don't know, whatever, you would never give away your eyes for $10 million, because there's no comparison of the pleasure of $10 million and the pleasure of your eyes. I remember one student said, well, maybe I would give away one eye, but you wouldn't. The reality is you really wouldn't, because the currency isn't the same. So that really is kind of the key to making God's will your will, which is, I have to remember that you created me for pleasure, but not all pleasures are created equal, right? I wouldn't sell my eyes for $10 million, because the pleasure of $10 million is a lower level of pleasure than the pleasure of vision. So we really have to understand that as we seek to harmonize our behavior and our desires with God's will, we have to trust that what God wants for us is truly, truly good for us. even if it clips our immediate lower level pleasures. It's a very foundational idea that our you would not give away your eyes. You wouldn't sell one of your children, although maybe you'd want to at certain stages of your life. You wouldn't sell one of your children for $10 million. Why? Because a loving relationship and $10 million, there's no exchange rate. So that is a very, as we seek to internalize this Mishnah, understanding that God creates the world for pleasure, but not all pleasures are created equal, is very critical, because otherwise we will not be able to shake the feeling that God's will, as revealed in our Torah, is kind of an impediment to our true desires. Okay, Julie, go down a little bit, please. I wrote this because I think that this is also, oh wait, hold on, a little bit, yeah, a little bit more, yeah. That, so it's also very important to understand Judaism is different than the other great faiths of Islam and Christianity, in the sense that Christianity speaks at great length about heaven and hell and reward in the next world, and has sort of a reluctant relationship to the pleasures of this world, where celibacy, not in all forms of Christianity, but celibacy is often like the highest level of righteousness. Or in Islam, you know, the idea of 70 virgins in the next world. I don't know what women get in the next world, but men get 70 virgins if they follow Allah, you know, whatever it is. But what's unbelievable about our Torah is that in the written Torah, there's really no mention of reward in the next world, which is funny, because the idea of a next world is one of the foundations of Jewish faith. It's one of the foundations of Jewish belief: reincarnation, next world, reward and punishment. That true reward exists in the world to come. But the Torah doesn't really talk about it. And the written Torah, the Talmud speaks about it at length, but the Torah doesn't really talk about it. Why is that? Because really, at the end of the day, the Torah is about this world. That, and I'll read this. This is from Rabbi David Rosenfeld. The Torah is a this world book. The Torah is a work which understands and never denies human nature. It knows what our needs are. It knows what our natures are. And it enables us to sublimate every one of our drives and talents toward the spiritual. It provides us with the keys to happiness and fulfillment in this world through the ideal combination of ritual and individuality, of discipline and personal self-expression. It allows both our bodies and souls to be satisfied and fulfilled. And when the Torah is observed properly, rather than denying the physical side of man, making us miserable, both body and soul become fulfilled, transforming man into a single and complete being in the image of God. What this is basically saying is, it is living a Torah life the right way is a tremendous pleasure in this world, meaning it's possible to make God's will your will. It really is. Obviously, we're not angels, but it's possible to say, God, let's give kosher for an example. God, you know my nature. You created me. You don't want me to deny my nature. You know what I want. You gave me desire, but you gave me everything in the physical world, but you also gave me the inner strength to enjoy the physical world by spiritualizing it and connecting it. When I connect the physical world to the spiritual world, it's like I've elevated everything, and it's a win-win. I get to enjoy the physical world, but I also get to spiritualize the physical. So the physical isn't just to tantalize my taste buds and just to satisfy my urges, but it's a means of connecting with you. You gave me a way to win and to enjoy the physical world, but also to experience true happiness from the physical world, because I've used the physical world as a means to connect with you. If I say a blessing before something, if I don't eat like stuff my face, but I eat like a healthy amount to enjoy and keep me healthy. And if I eat the kind of food that you want me to eat, I'm taking all that physical stuff and I'm elevating it and I'm using it to serve you. You don't want me not to enjoy it. I'm not meant to be an angel. I'm meant to enjoy the physical in this world, but I'm really, truly meant to both enjoy it and use it as a means to connect with you. So what an incredible life in this world. I don't need, in other words, why does the written Torah not tell us anything about the world to come? It doesn't talk about written Torah. I mean, the 5 books of Moses. I mean, the Chumash that we read on Shabbat, the Parshiot, the Parshas. So not the Talmud, but the Chumash. It really doesn't say anything. It doesn't say anything about reincarnation. It doesn't say anything about true reward being in the world to come. It doesn't say anything about the resurrection of the dead. It doesn't say anything about the arrival of the Messiah, of Mashiach. These are all fundamental beliefs in Judaism. You know, one of the tragedies in American Judaism is those things became so totally ignored that people truly, I always thought those were Christian concepts: reincarnation, resurrection of the dead, Messiah, heaven, the world to come. Those are Christian, but no, those are absolutely Jewish ideas. But the Torah, so to speak, goes out of its way not to talk about them. Why? I think what Rabbi Rosenfeld is saying here is because we really need to internalize, oh my gosh, keeping the Torah it allows me to actually be happy, because I'm meant to enjoy the world, but not just to tantalize my like nerve endings and my taste buds. I'm meant to enjoy what you gave me, because you created the world for pleasure. So I should eat and I should drink and I should enjoy the world, and I don't need to be poor. I don't need to be ascetic. I don't need to deny myself a beautiful home. I don't need to not travel and see the world. I'm meant to enjoy the world. But when I combine that with doing mitzvot with these physical things, I enjoy the physical and I attach the physical to its raison d'etre, which is its spiritual component. So you really truly gave me the ability to enjoy this world. You really, really did. So that's why I can't say for sure, but I think that's why, I mean, the definitely sages talk about this. That's why you're not going to find any concept of reward in the next world, even though it's so foundational to Judaism, in the written Torah, because it's a this world book. Because God's will is the true ticket, so to speak, to happiness. And but we're only going to get there when we understand that God created us for pleasure. God made the world for pleasure, but all pleasures are not created equal. And that allows us to curtail and clip some of our physical passions for a deeper reward, which is unifying our disparate parts and connecting to the source of all reality, which is our Father in heaven, right? And that's a deeper pleasure than the lobster. And that allows us to contemplate giving up a lower level pleasure for a higher level of pleasure. Julie, go down, because I want to finish up and then I want to open it up to the group. Okay, we're going to do okay, right there. Annul your will. Okay, this seems almost redundant. Make his will the same as your will, annul your will before his will, so that he may annul the will of others before your will. It almost sounds like, what's really the difference between the two? But honestly, have you ever really dissolved or annulled your will? Have you ever really wanted to do something and said, God, I want this, but God really doesn't want me to do this, so I'm not going to do it. For those of you who have ever succeeded in actually not speaking Lashon Hara, like when you wanted to gossip about someone, when you wanted to say something, but you stopped yourself and said, no, God really doesn't want me just to talk about other people. That's dissolving your will. That's different than making his will your will. This is dissolving your intense drives. And you know, from my coffee story, right? What you'll do to get your needs met. So this is actually experiencing the power of saying, well, I want this, but kind of God says no, so I'm not going to do it. By the way, it doesn't mean you don't want it. You know, it's funny because, you know, I'll read this. This is from the Medrash, which is really powerful. What it's saying here is, it's not about, it doesn't say, and when it says annul your will before his will, it doesn't mean don't desire anything unholy. That's not at all what it's saying. We're human beings. We have tons of desires. Desire it. It's not about not desiring. It's that your greatness comes when you want something, but because your Father in heaven, who created you and gave you a Torah to live your very, very best life, says, that's no. And you say, I'm not going to do it. That is super powerful. Not, I don't want to do it. And not, I don't want to gossip. Not that I don't want, I do want to do it. It's illustrated by this Medrash. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah taught, a man should never say, it's impossible for me to wear a garment of wool and linen. That's the mitzvah of shatnez, that according to Jewish law, we don't mix in one garment, wool and linen. Or I couldn't bear to eat pork. I couldn't bear to eat pig meat. Or I could never commit adultery. Rather, he should say, I could very well do such things. But what shall I do when my Father in heaven has forbidden me? In other words, this is on whatever level you want to take this. You're not, the fact that you have lots of desires that aren't ultimately good for you does not make you a lesser person. We're built with desires. I have the power to understand that something's greater than me. By the way, if you want to see this in full action, just go to any Alcoholics Anonymous meeting or any meeting with addictions. What's the very, very first step? It's surrendering your will to I can't remember the exact wording. Maybe somebody remembers, but the very first one is, I wish I could remember. What's the first of the 12 steps?
It's admitting that you're powerless over alcohol and your life has become unmanageable. And I think the second one is a power greater than yourself.
What's the second one? Are you reading
I think the second one is a power greater than yourself, or something.
Right. I admit
call
when
God.
Right. However you define God. I admit that I'm powerless over my will. Now, this is addiction, which is a whole nother level. But so you can't exactly compare it. But addiction is, I admit I'm powerless over my will. My will has a power that I can't control, and I surrender to a higher power. It's Rabbi Abraham Twersky, Olav Shalom. He would always say that that Judaism and the 12 steps were perfectly aligned. That there was nothing in the 12 steps that was problematic from a Judaic perspective. And he was a huge proponent, and he brought 12 steps to the Jewish community, to the Orthodox community, because he said that it was so totally aligned with Judaism. So nobody in the 12 steps says, I'm fine now. No, they don't. They say, my will is so totally beyond me that I surrender. I surrender to a higher power. So we don't say, I don't want to break, I have no desire to break your will, God. I'm like an angel. No, we say, Hashem, I want so many things that you, in your love and in your supervision of me and in your caring for me, don't want me to do. And I am on this earth to learn how to make your will mine, to harmonize those disparate components, and to annul my will, which is even stronger. Why? Because nullification at the time of temptation It's enormous. So, okay, for those of us, like for Orthodox people, okay, you'd never wear shatnez, you wouldn't eat pork, you wouldn't hopefully commit adultery or whatever it is. But the idea of it doesn't matter if it's shatnez, pork, and adultery, or if it's lashon hara, giving some of your income to tzedakah. It doesn't matter what mitzvah it is. It's the point of it where I have a will for something and I actually experience negating it. By the way, for homework, just do this once this week with speaking negatively about someone. If you're about to, which is not allowed in our Torah, it's called lashon hara, which, by the way, is not, a lot of people say, but it's true. But lashon hara applies, especially when it's true. So don't think, but it's true as a kind of a justification, because lashon hara is when it's true. So just experience for yourself the feeling, I'll do it too, because it's just as relevant for me, I promise you, of I want to do this right now. Think about when you want something. Think about it. If you struggle with overeating or over drinking or over watching or, things like being on that, whatever you're struggling with, everybody struggles with something different. But, I was just reading a really, really powerful, I can't remember. It was by Martha Beck. She's a famous life coach. And she wrote a book about integrity. And she has a tool. I'll try to find, I'll take a picture of it. It's a exercise. I think it's called Walk Back the Cat. Something like Walk Back the Cat. And basically what it is you're trying to get to, let's say you're struggling with overeating, right? Which many, many people struggle with. So, before you know it, you're just eating a ton, right? Well, you're eating a lot of sugar and you're just kind of whatever it is. But if you walk back the cat, what was I thinking? What was I thinking when I walked into the kitchen? And what was I thinking before I walked into the kitchen? And what happened to me in the morning? And I'll send it to Julie. I'll send a picture. I'll take a picture of it and send it to Julie. But why am I saying this? Oh, because understanding what it feels like at the moment of when your will gets, what are you saying to yourself when you give in? What are you feeling? What are the feelings in your body? So, if you live an Orthodox life, you would never eat pork. You just wouldn't. I mean, honestly, I don't even have the slightest desire for it. But that doesn't make me a better person. It doesn't make me a better Jew. All it means is that my will is at a different place. Rav Dessler talks about this a lot. He talks about something called Nekudat HaBechira, which means the point of free choice. It doesn't matter if you're struggling with one thing and I'm struggling with something maybe more nuanced or whatever it is. That's not the point. The point is we're all at a point. We all have a point where we want something and the justifications come and at that moment, what Rabban Gamliel is saying is nullify your will. You know what? I want this. I feel it in my body. I looked at I justified it but you know what? I'm not going to do it because what can I say, says the Medrash, my Father in heaven has forbidden me. So that's really what it means. Annul your will before his will. But then it goes on so that he may annul the will of others before your will. I want to get into that. Oh, I have to hurry because we're almost done. By the way, this is all from Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, it's amazing how aligned it is with our Torah, which was 2,000 years before. But at the moment that you partake in something that's not good for you, it will look right in your eyes. You will justify it. All of a person's ways appear just and proper in his own eyes, says the book of Mishlei. So what does it mean? So that he may annul the will of others before your will. And we're going to end with that. Julie, just go down a bit. That one thing to understand, and alcoholics do talk about this. It's very interesting. Anyone who's experienced addiction or knows someone who's experienced addiction who has gone to meetings and really worked to sublimate the addiction, some of them will say remarkably, like, that the desire for it was removed. That one day I woke up and, I mean, look, you could even say, like, on a biological level, if you're addicted to sugar and then you don't eat it for, let's say, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days, you've weaned yourself from the addiction. But you can also look at it spiritually, which is that God operates with me, and God operates with human beings, mida keneged mida, measure for measure, which means that when I seek to advance myself, when I seek to purify myself, when I seek to connect to you, God, you help me achieve my goal. You mirror my efforts by meeting me in the other direction, and not one-to-one, meaning when I do a little bit, you'll do a lot. And of course, the most famous verse that describes this is when God says, give me an opening like the tip of a needle, just a little bit of effort, and I will broaden it like the portal of a banquet hall. Which means that if you make one direction in the nullification of your will, I will make it easier for you. I will make it possible for you. And I will respond to you. So I think that the homework for all of us is to experience the experience of nullifying your will before God's will just once this week. Meaning just once, like actually want something and experience the experience of not doing it because my Father in heaven says no. Remember what King Solomon says in the book of Mishlei: when you want something, your ways will appear just and proper. Meaning the power of rationalization is incredible, and you can convince yourself that wrong is right is wrong, especially at the moment of desire. But when a person truly, that really is why in this Mishnah, there's making God's will your will, and there's nullifying your will, which are two separate things. But I'm going to finish, but the idea is somewhat similar. And God responds to us in turn, that God is not an aloof God. God is not a removed God. That ultimately, David and so many other people say, like, let's substitute for the word for religion, let's substitute it for relationship. That more than a religion, Judaism is a relationship between us and our Creator. And like David always says, a relationship is only as strong as the one who wants it the least. So God's desire for a relationship is unconditional, absolute, and total, and absolutely constant. We, because he is one, we who have disparate parts, often the desire for independence is much greater. And by definition, we're always going to be the one who wants the relationship the least. So when we make a move toward him, he responds in kind, and even more so. And that's what the version of Shir HaShirim is. So even to say, God, once this week, I'm going to nullify your will, my will, for your will, and may it be your will that when you see me nullifying my will, because I want a relationship with you, you respond by making my will your will, which is Julie, just, I want to make sure I'm reading it right. Hold on, go back. Yeah. Annul your will before his will, so that he may know the will of others before your will. But I think there's another verse. Hold on one second. Okay. Yeah, no, that is the end of it. So that he will meet us where we are. So I said this a lot of times, but I think that it's an incredibly powerful thing to experience just one time this week. Understanding that and that you have the capacity to do this, and I want to end here, understanding that that's how to live a happier life. The Torah goes out of its way, so to speak, to not talk about reward in the next world. Why? Because the message, the meta message is spiritualizing the physical, enjoying the physical world, but attaching it to a spiritual purpose gives a human being genuine happiness in this world. It's not something that curtails your pleasure. It might involve clipping and curtailing your pleasure, but the world has different levels of pleasure. And connecting, blending your will with God's will is a greater pleasure than the physical thing that you are curtailing just a little bit. So the discipline of saying, of course I want this, but God says no, is not easy. But the pleasure of that is greater than the experience of that physical thing in and of itself. God creates the world for pleasure, but not all pleasures are created equally. And really knowing that and trusting that allows us to make our will, to sync our will and nullify our opposing will, and seek to harmonize our will and God's will together. I hope that made sense. That was a lot of wills and gods, and I hope that all made sense to you. So we're going to open it up now to the group. Julie, just go to well, no, I think we're going to open it up to the gallery view. I wanted you to be able to see the Mishnah before you ask any questions, but that's okay. Let's open it up to the gallery. Oh, good. I'm glad that answered a lot of your questions. Oh, okay. I think she had to leave. Okay. Thank you, Leslie, if you didn't leave. Okay. Oh, Trudy's here. What? Trudy's here. I just saw Trudy, and Trudy's in Israel right now.
Allie.
I am, and I just came on to tell you all that you all need to come visit her.
Trudy spent Trudy spent time with us in Israel. It was awesome. She just left our house yesterday.
Oh, that's so nice.
Okay, Stacy, hi.
So hi, Allie. So
Hi.
this Mishnah for me, it's a very tough one. I think about the will and the want, and this whole time while you were speaking, hearing about wills and wants, that's when I'm feeling very secure about myself. I want this, I'm going to do it. Great. And then there's that whole other side where I want something, but I'm very insecure about reaching that goal. And I'm held back. And so I'm trying, and so from everything you've said today, I'm supposed to be also harmonizing and being one with God's message to me. But when the insecurities percolate, I don't know how to get out of that and make it a will and a want. So and that's why I'm struggling with today. I wish every moment in my life I was so secure and strong about, everything I do in my day. But that is definitely not the case.
Okay, just from my understanding, you've used the word like insecurity around like my will, and like I need to can you explain that a little bit for the group, or do you not? Does that
Well,
not
I can give a very basic example with my work. Okay, I'm a realtor here in Washington. I want to be the best realtor here. There's so many things that there are things that I feel like are holding me back. Again, probably some insecurities. I don't put myself on social media all the time.
Sure.
Right? Easy, simple example. Everybody else is putting themselves on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Why hasn't God allowed me to easily put myself on social media and be happy with the way I talk and look and be comfortable with who I am. Why has that not happened?
I really want to make sure I'm I mean, I'm getting everything you're saying. Nothing you're saying is not understandable. I just want to make sure I understand.
So I have this will to be the best,
Yeah.
but yet things are holding me back. Is that what God intended? Is that his message that he's sending to me? That Stacy, you don't need to be the best. Is that what I'm supposed to be hearing?
You mean,
Ally,
are
oh,
you saying, Stacey, like, I see the results are that I'm like not the best. Like I'm seeing that the results are that other people are ahead of me, so to speak. Should I take I'm asking you if this is what you're saying. Should I take the results as they are? Like I see I'm not on the top and say this is God's will? And is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm questioning all that
Ally,
because I
Wait,
know
Stephen, you're shaking your head. Oh, Hannah, okay. So let's stay on Stacey's question, but you're shaking your head, Stephen. Hannah, you have something to say about it.
Well, all I want to say is that I always also want to be the best, but I want to be the best I can be. In other words, for myself, and not because somebody is better than me. Okay.
Mm.
You know, like I'm doing a big event here for Stand With Us, and I have almost 200 people coming to the event. So to me, that is the best I could do for me. Now, there are other events that people get 400 people, but for me,
Yeah.
I've worked very hard to be the best that I can be. And I always feel that way. I'm kind of
That's really powerful.
myself. And, and when like my rabbi said here in Arizona, he said, you do your best and
Right.
it will help you get to where you want to go. I don't try to compare myself. I'm very lucky. I have 2 homes. I know people that have $3 million homes, well, I don't want that. I want to be the best I can be. And this is my thing. And I told my son, do your best and the rest will follow.
Yeah, I think that's a super, super powerful answer, Hannah. And I mean, when you compare, you despair. That's really the truth, because either you're on top or you're on the bottom, but it's somebody else's journey. It's not your track. You're on somebody else's journey. It has nothing to do with you. So
Right.
that's real, Hannah. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, Stacey, but Hannah, I think what you said is incredibly powerful. And there are a couple other people that wanted to say something. Stephen, you wanted to say something?
Well,
Or Adrian? Yeah, someone?
I'm really, I hear, Stacy, what you're saying, but the question that's going through my mind, why now in the context of this particular lesson? And then you're asking the question, does God not want me to do better in spite of the fact that I want to excel? And it just seems to me, posing a question in that way, it's not a question that can be answered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think maybe there's another way, a better way of asking this question, but asking it like this, I think, is going to lead you into a dead alley.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah, Adrian.
I think it's the way the question was posed just makes it overwhelming. I think if you limit to spiritually being the best you can and being better and put it in the perspective of you don't have to be better all at once, that it's a process, it's a journey. And if you look at the process of being better step by step, it's much more attainable and not as overwhelming. And there's also much more satisfaction in that.
But Adrian, she says she clearly wants to be the best.
Well, that can,
I want it. She's not saying I want to be better tomorrow than I was yesterday. She's saying
But
I
you-
want to be the best.
well, but you can't go from A to Z. Being the best means being better and better and better. And eventually, maybe you get to the best, but you make progress. You can't go from being whomever to being the best. It doesn't, things don't work that way.
Oh, that's true.
She's
Right, okay, so-
comparing
yeah.
herself to other people is what she's doing.
Yeah. And you're not even on social media. Oh my gosh, it'd be 10 times worse if you saw.
You know,
someone-
it's, yeah, I think, like I'm single, I'm divorced. I have friends that are very happily so-called married. I can't compare myself, to these people. I compare myself to what I have.
Yeah, it's very powerful what you're saying. That's really the secret to happiness, Hannah, is comparing yourself to yourself. There is a concept called kina sofrim, which is called, the jealousy of scholars, but what it really means is if someone has, and Stacy, this is relevant, if someone has an attribute that you want for yourself, the idea of like asking, what is it that I am so drawn to that this person has? And like, how could I develop it for myself, but not in the context of comparison. That's the root of despair, is to compare. It's all about what you said, Hannah. No, Adrian and Stephen, I think Stephen was concerned about the question itself, which is almost like fatalist. Well, if this is the situation that I'm in, God must want me to be like in this situation, which I agree. I wouldn't use the word dead alley, Stephen, which you used, because that sounds really bad for me.
Oh.
But everyone's, you see how people race to answer, Stacy, because I guess it's a dead alley. The perspective is but I also think that there's one thing about Stacy. I think what Hannah said is more important. It's more foundational than this, but I still think this is worth saying, that in the Megillah, in Megillah's Esther, Esther is very passive in the first half of the Megillah, and she's really like a very passive figure. And then when Haman creates a decree to destroy the Jews, and the Jews are on the verge of genocide, and Mordecai sends a message to Esther. The message is basically, Esther, the Jews will be saved one way or the other. Well, if you don't go to the king now for the Jewish people, you will be lost. The Jewish people will be saved by another means. And who knows if you were put in this exact situation for this very, very purpose right now. She hears, I know it's a little complicated, but she hears a certain message and she leaps into proactive action. And I think what took her from passivity to proactiveness was going from focusing on self. How do I look? How do I appear? Do I look successful? Do I look that, how are people perceiving me? To how can I use my skills and talents to make the world better? To how can I use my business skills, my personality? How can I use it to bring more people joy through real estate or whatever it is? But you're taking it from a self-concern to how am I needed? How can I shine my light? God gave me unique attributes, unique ways of connecting to people. How can I bring people, I'm making up this goal, but bring people joy through real estate? Like it's joy through buying a home. Like, how can I use it goes from over focus on self, which makes you insecure, which makes you like curtail, stay small or whatever it is, to seeing that it's beyond self. And then it's not about you, it's about what you bring to the world, your piece in the God's puzzle. And so I think that the amazing thing about the book of Esther is she flips from very self-conscious and small to really the savior of the Jewish people. But what was the definitive difference? Moving from like how I seem to what gifts I really have to give the world. I think about this all the time as I start my coaching business, because the more I focus on like, how does this video look, you know, like how do I seem versus what is the message that I want to give to you? Like Talia, she's my marketing director. She puts me on Instagram. I don't even go on Instagram. I'm all over Instagram. I've never even been on it. I don't even know how to get on it. So but the only way I can do these videos is if I go from like, do I sound right? Like, can you see my crooked tooth? You know, like a self, you know, to, what am I saying and why does the world need to hear it? And that kavanah, that mindset allows me to go out of my comfort zone. So I honestly think Hannah's response is the critical response, but I think there's a lot to say about it.
Yeah, all
Stacey,
wonderful advice from everyone.
Yeah, we answered your question.
Yeah, I love everybody's mind. So I love what everybody said. I think it's great. So yes, Stephen, I'm okay now.
Stephen's worried about you like that. He's an empath.
Yeah.
Did we even answer your questions?
But no, I think
Anyone
the
else
whole attitude of be the best you can be, you know, and getting one out of always comparing ourselves to others. It's such a mistake. And I really preach that to my children. I wish I remembered it often. But
Oh, wait, I have a quote from Cheryl Richardson, another great life coach, that I love about comparison. Hold on one second. It's so powerful. She writes here, listen to this. You will never feel motivated to do more by feeling less than. The only way to win is not to play the game. You will never feel motivated to do more by feeling less than.
But Ellie, you know what, I think actually of all the things we said, I think you perhaps said one of the most important, which is rather than focusing on your appearance, focus on your gifts.
Not just your appearance, not just your physical, but how people are perceiving you. Focus on your gifts, yeah.
Yeah, focus on your gifts, on what you have to offer, what you have to share, what you have to give. You know, on how you could make the world a better place, I guess. Right. Now, I had a reaction to your story about your coffee. You know, you're saying you use this to illustrate how willful you are. But I was thinking that actually you sublimated your will to that of God's, because it wouldn't be that difficult to put a pot of water, boiling water, on the stove, which you didn't do.
So that, I absolutely hear what you're saying, but for me, I would never do that. That, you know, and that's the nature of your point of free choice. Let's say, like I had a friend who was becoming more observant, and one of the things she did when she became more observant is she bought an urn, you know, one of those urns that they boil water and then you turn it to Shabbat mode. You buy them at Judaica stores. So let's say that week she had bought the urn and she was choosing to do this for the first time, and she forgot to plug the urn in. Then at that moment, she might have that free choice dilemma. But for me, that would, like, I wouldn't, it's not in my point of free choice. It's sort of like, it's not, there are things that you just would never do because they're not in your, it's not a source of tension and free will. So actually that's not, like, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. So, but I hear what you're saying.
Well, no, I know
hear
for
what
you
you're
it's been
saying.
a source of tension. My sister's been a vegetarian for years, and
That's an example.
I finally understand that she really doesn't have any desire. She's not tempted. She's not at all interested. I understand. I know it's the same
Yes.
when it comes to this.
Right.
But even though you're not exercising free will, or even though you're not in conflict, you still are following the will of
Yes,
God.
it's true. that you know what, you sound like Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. He was a great Hasidic Rebbe. Stephen's like, I sound like who? A great Hasidic Rebbe who would always spin everything in people's merit. Like he would always find, but actually the truth is, you're really amazing because look what you did. So you just pulled a Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, always spinning it in someone's merit. Like you see that you told the story to say like when you know, it's maybe something a little disparaging, but the truth is it shows how great you really are. So that's a beautiful thing what you just did. Yeah, hi Donna.
Hey, Ellie. Hi, everybody. I have to leave in a minute, but I wanted to
Yeah, I do
share.
too.
I felt like the class was so interesting. Some of the principles I've heard before, some of the teachings I found a little bit really heavy and the struggle and harmonize like all of what you discussed. And then I think towards the end, you said something that really resonated with me and I think I can take with me and take forward. And that is the piece of you do a little and God will do a lot. And I feel like that was really powerful. You know, am I hear it? Did I hear that the right way? Okay. Or
Yes, you
in
did.
context? Because I felt that was really powerful. Like we can do our best. We can do our little by little. We can grow. We can learn. We can appreciate. We can be in gratitude. We can move forward and feel like that's all God wants from us. You know, part of what he wants from us. And then he can reach back and help our way, you know.
That's right. That's right. It's a very deep principle. It's really said the most beautifully in Shir HaShirim, in our canon, in our Tanakh, which is you opening the size of the eye of the needle, and God will broaden it so much that chariots can drive through. You just put in a little effort. Yeah, Linda.
Thank you.
I know it's
I
late,
have to
but
go.
I'm still haunted by what Stacy had to say. And so I'm thinking about today's class, if we have feelings that we're unhappy about, perhaps these are traits that we want to work on for ourselves. So perhaps there's some attributes that you feel you want to work on that will eventually maybe make you the very best of what you want to be. So I don't know if I'm explaining myself so elegantly.
I hear you, Linda. I'm sort of thinking how important it is from what I've learned today from all the great minds we have in the class. The best, again, has to be my best, not the best that appears to be out there, but it has to be my best. And it can't become my issue to compare myself or others are comparing. It's noise. I have to let that go and just be my best. So I think that's a very powerful reminder.
Very, very,
So
very
thank-
powerful point.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you need to do is hire Allie's social media consultant.
Well, that's Talia Vegan. I'm telling you, I am evidently, I've heard through the grapevine that I'm all over Instagram. I've never been on it. I've never gone on once. I don't even know. It asks me for like some username. I can't remember what it is.
It must be a family thing, Allie, that we're all afraid of social
When in
media.
doubt, blame, Shelley and my father and love you guys. When you compare, you despair,
I
right?
love
When you compare, you despair. I love what Hannah said. It's something to take to the bank. It really, really is very foundational. All right, love everyone.
All right, love you too.
Okay,
See you.
see
Thanks.
everyone
everyone.
soon. Okay, bye-bye.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.